turn it over.
Okay, great. Do I share my screen? Can I do that?
I will do that. Oh, I have to go to a different view to do that. Okay, now I can. And you are a co-host.
Okay, great. Let me pull up and share my screen. There we go. Good morning, everybody. So nice to see you. And I'm going to run this through this rather quickly. But the highlights are that we are getting ready for the competition for 2023. Apparently, HUD is going to release the NOFO in June or July. So as always, we are trying to set the continuum ready so that we hit the ground running, because usually you only have 90 days to respond to an application that requires us to submit over $200 million. So we start the work as early as we can. So in this year's competition, there are two very important things that are being looked at. One is the data that is used to evaluate projects. These are projects that receive a continuum of care funding from HUD, which is the biggest source of funding for HUD to our continuum. It's a competition, it's a nationwide competition, so we always have to present the best applications, showing the best system improvements to get the most funding. So, like I said, two areas that are going to be critical that are changing. One is the data source that's going to be used to evaluate projects. And two is the methodology in scoring projects. So the first one, the data source, we have always used what's called the annual performance report. And that report is for every agency that receives this funding has to submit this report, whether it's to HUD or to LASA. And this report is basically what gets aggregated across the country to present to Congress in terms of what this money is doing. The way the competition was is that the way we had it was we submitted the most recent approved HUD report. So the way it works is you prepare your report, you submit it either to HUD or to LASA, depending on who your grantor is. And then HUD reviews the report and then approves it or publishes it. As you can imagine, they're doing this for the whole country. So they're literally like 3 years behind in approving reports. So when we use the HUD approved report, so if we're in 2023, we would be using a report that was submitted in 2019. So you can see that there's a real gap in between. And sometimes things have happened, things have changed that have made that report probably look better, or things may have happened where the report is now not looking the same, but it's 3 years of reports that we're not looking. So the idea has been put on the table to look at more recent data. And so right now, the proposal is to use data that is of the year, the preceding year. So we're in 2023, the idea is to use data from 2022. And to do that, we can only use HMIS. So the new approach is what you see on the screen, on the right-hand side of the screen, that says pull data from HMIS. The City of Santa Monica and the domestic violence projects do not put information in HMIS. So there's going to be a workaround for those two entities. And then we'll be reviewing 2021, 2022 data, which means that any data that for any projects that end in 2022, which makes that a lot more recent than reviewing, data from 2019. So this is an example of what it would look like. So if we use the old method on the left-hand side of the screen, of my screen, you'd see that we would use the 2019 APRs, and this shows you the program dates for different types of projects. So if your contract years goes from February 1 to January 2021, or whether it goes from 2020 to 2021, you still would be using 2019 data. If we look at the new approach on the right-hand side, we would all be using data that ended in 2022. And in that same example, those two projects would still, in the example on the right, the projects would still get valid real-time information. That's more recent. There are some downsides to this and or some ramifications to this idea. One is that because we're using data from HMIS, and all of us who use HMIS know this, there's all sorts of kinks and all sorts of issues that happen when you pull up data. So there's going to be a greater responsibilities for providers to really do quality assurance on their data, to make sure more frequently, to make sure that they don't have a huge data issue at the time that we are working on these issues. Number one. And number two, for LASA is the same. LASA is going to have to up its game when it comes to HMIS. They're going to have better response times, because sometimes you send in a ticket and it takes 3 days to get a response, right? So this also puts the onus on them to step up their game and figure out how they're going to support agencies in better, with good response times and in real time. The other thing is for the City of Santa Monica and the domestic violence projects, because they are not in HMIS, we are going to have to use a manual APR, which means they're going to have to take their data that's recent and put it manually in the APR and then submit that, which is more work. The last thing is that basically this is going to require us to sign off. All agencies that are receiving this funding are going to have to sign off and say they approve this. The timeline for this is, as you see on the screen, so there's been some work happening. They actually did some focus groups. To be honest with you, the focus groups were not very keen on this change. They felt that it was, trying to fix something that's not broken, and most of them were agencies receiving grant funding, and so that's going to be I wouldn't even say it was a mixed bag. It was kind of overwhelmingly, the agencies didn't really think it was a great idea. It was just going to be like a lot for probably not worth the buck, but it still hasn't been approved. So there's which is why I'm bringing it here again. This is really an opportunity for folks to continue thinking about this and continue providing information and going into the continuum of care meeting and the board meetings, the commission meeting, to really share their view, because again, it hasn't been approved yet. So it could change. So in May, they're going to start putting the information for us to pull and look at. In June, it's all going to be projects and agencies are going to sign off on the data. And then in July, they're going to start using the data for evaluation. And that's the extent of this piece. The second piece, which is changing the methodology, I will send slides for those. There's a lot more discussion around that. We are not quite there yet. But I wanted to just give you a heads up that that's also coming. If there are any questions, I will gladly answer them.
Well, Christine, thank you so much for that information. And would it be possible for you to send me that PowerPoint so that I can send it out to the coalition?
Done already.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Sure.
Any questions at all? That was a lot of information to cover in a very short amount of time. So thank you for that. And we'll be sending that out so that you have more information. Mm-hmm. All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Once again, please introduce yourself in the chat. If you have any programs you would like to share with the group, we'd love to exchange that information. And I am going to turn it over to Genevieve. One of our board members, Genevieve, has set this up with Lisa. And so Genevieve, it's all you.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you, Christine, for that wonderful presentation. It seems like, as in so many things, data is becoming the most important thing, and we're really having to be very precise about our data collection. So I know that's going to be a challenge for everyone. But I am so pleased right now to be able to introduce Lisa Clary Reale from the Food Equity Roundtable. Lisa gave a wonderful presentation to our Westside Food Security Group a couple of months ago, and now she's here to let us know about the Food Equity Roundtable, about the work that they've been doing. It's really a coalition of agencies working with LA County to have an action plan to address food insecurity. And so I'm happy to turn it over to Lisa to let us know what are the updates in the action plan, especially given the recent loss of CalFresh benefits and the ways that we're all just trying to struggle to keep up. Thanks so much, Lisa, for being here.
Thank you, Genevieve. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. I do know that all of you are doing incredible work on this issue and a lot of safety net issues. So it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm going to screen share some slides and share with you a little bit of the background of the LA County Food Equity Roundtable, as well as some of the updates. As Genevieve mentioned, there have been a few updates since I last spoke to her group. So let me see if I can, let's get this screen share up here and get this. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with just a little background. And by the way, I'm a philanthropic and nonprofit consultant who is representing the Annenberg Foundation. They're one of my clients, and I've worked with them on a number of things, but been working with them on this project for a couple of years now. So I represent them. And as you see, they are co-chairing this initiative and have been for the last year or so. So the background on all of this is when the pandemic hit in 2020, the county set up an emergency task force, food security emergency task force that met from spring of 2020 to mid-2021. It was about 40 stakeholders that the county pulled together dealing with emergency response to food. So as you can imagine, DPSS and DPH and the food bank was there, and numerous people, and the Grocers Association, and a lot of people. There were only two members of the philanthropic community, California Community Foundation and the Annenberg Foundation. Both of us sort of inserted ourselves indirectly onto the task force, both interested in the issue of food, and didn't realize how this would evolve. So there were a lot of, as you all know, because you all were involved during the pandemic, on all the coordinated efforts going on throughout the county. And Gary Giroux, who was then Chief Sustainability Officer, convened this task force. And really the purpose was to coordinate efforts and to make sure that everyone was fed during the pandemic and there were no gaps. Annenberg and CCF were represented not only on the task force, but we were part of what was called a little steering committee that met weekly to make sure that there was a flow from meeting to meeting and there really was nothing falling through the cracks. And obviously, as everyone knows here, all the pandemic did was exacerbate the crisis that we already know has existed pre-pandemic and will continue post-pandemic. And so that was something that some of us learned that in philanthropy, that this is not an emergency issue, that it is an issue that permeates the entire region and continues to permeate the country. So our work during the pandemic was not just coordination, but was raising awareness with our stakeholders out there, the public, the philanthropic community, the people who don't deal with food, raising awareness that we needed to move beyond an emergency approach to food and create a more permanent response. So what we did, and that was the biggest eye-opener for all of us, is we looked at our county system and we saw we were very dependent on a system that relied on emergency distribution, either through food banks or pantries or someplace. And we relied on enrolling people in CalFresh. And we felt there needed to be much more, that was not a sustainable model. It needed to go beyond that. So we crafted a report to the Board of Supervisors recommending the creation of a food Equity Roundtable, a 2-year pilot to address food insecurity in LA County. And in February 2021, a motion was introduced by both Supervisors Hahn and Kuehl to create the roundtable to strengthen the county's capacity for food distribution programs and to really focus on a food justice agenda. So the goal was to bring government, all the sectors, government, nonprofit, philanthropic, business together to develop long-term solutions. The roundtable started convening. It comprised of 20 stakeholders. What we didn't want was a table of 100 people where nothing was going to get done. So 20 stakeholders, experts and civic leaders dedicated to creating equitable food systems. So we had government at the table. We had a handful of county departments, not all of them. Philanthropy was at the table, nonprofits, labor, academia, and business. Is co-chaired, and this was very intentional, was co-chaired by county and philanthropy. Philanthropy agreed to pay for this 2-year pilot. So 3 foundations, Annenberg, CCF, and Weingart, all pooled their money and decided we're going to pay for this pilot. But the intentionality was we want to co-chair it as well to ensure that it moves forward and it doesn't just die an early death. So our mission was really to develop, and this is a gargantuan mission, develop and implement a multidimensional cross-sector program solutions, okay, prioritizing food insecurity. And we had a vision that everyone would have access, equitable access to nutritious food. We had a small staff, we have a small staff, it's a roundtable director, program manager who's part-time, and interns in and out, mostly grad students and undergrad students from Cal State and UCLA. And then we had, in addition to the roundtable members, we had what was called a technical advisory committee, members from UCLA, USC, who we called upon for data and studies and research studies throughout the roundtable's work. So we did a lot of information gathering, as you can imagine. Even though a lot of the roundtable members are dealing with food 24/7, we felt we needed to do a huge scan because not everyone was on the roundtable. So we had working groups that did a deeper dive in between roundtable meetings. We had working groups discussing transportation as a barrier, food and nutrition risks for people with disabilities and older adults. We had a working group around dietary restrictions. We had a working group around structural racism and modernizing food systems. And these people met in between our roundtable meetings and reported back. We also conducted listening tours and surveys to understand, truly understand the needs out there of the entire population, including key target populations. So we listened to about 200 local and national leaders. We went across the country to New York, to Boston, to places, Denver, that had really implemented some creative solutions for food insecurity, and we talked to them. And then there were research studies. USC did a couple of studies for us, really assessing the data out there of how many households were really truly food insecure. And then CCF commissioned a report from the LARTA Institute on landscaping urban agriculture. So we wanted to look at what's going on in urban ag around LA County. In addition to all of that, we created an advocacy committee, policy and advocacy committee. I know Genevieve just joined it. Genevieve has actually been on it. Some of you may also be on it. And that's a separate committee that was meeting monthly, focusing on identifying federal, state, local legislation. Because as you all know, it's not just distribution and other things. There's a lot of policies out there and a lot of policies that go from national to local that impact food and impact people's ability to access food. So we decided we had to have a committee just dedicated to that. And we know that this plays a critical role in changing systems. And we wanted to ensure that our future food system in LA, again, was not dependent on emergency solutions, but also included changes in the food supply chain and the way people access food. So year one of our pilot, the roundtable began meeting. You know, our pilot kicked in July when we started when we hired a director, but we didn't start the roundtable meeting until October of 2021. And you'll see I outlined our year one framework. You know, we started every couple of months, we dealt with a different issue. We got together in October 2021 to sort of set our framework for what we were going to do for the following year. And then in November, we talked about food equity, January affordability, March access, in May safety net programs, July, the whole innovation, long-term resilience issue. In September, our roundtable reviewed a draft of the strategic plan, which we commissioned to be written by a wonderful firm called Do Goodery. We worked very closely with them. We vetted our plan with key stakeholders, and on December 6th of 2022, we launched a strategic plan for LA County on food. And I will share with you not only these slides afterward, I'll share them with Darcy, but I will send her a link to the plan, which is an interactive digital plan, and I think you'll enjoy it if you haven't already seen it. So the plan was launched on December 6th with a 90-minute panel discussion on Zoom, moderated by Spectrum One host Alex Cohen. So it's a very comprehensive and concrete, really comprehensive plan to ending food and nutrition insecurity. The LA Times did an editorial a few days after our launch, and I quote, they say, undoubtedly, it's a huge challenge, even though regional food banks and other efforts to address food insecurity have existed for decades. As a result, the plan is ambitious and presents enterprising solutions that can be set in motion immediately. They went further, though, to say that this is all fine. I think they called it everything but the kitchen sink as well, which was one of my favorite quotes. But they said it's promising, and they threw a gauntlet out to the county to now move forward, saying philanthropy and community cannot be the only ones solving this problem. The county has to do something. So just to share with you a little bit about the plan, it focused on the overall goal was building a stronger and healthier LA, okay, improving food and nutrition security. So we broke it up into 4 goals. Goal 1 was improving affordability of healthy foods. Goal 2, increasing equitable access to healthy food. Goal 3, build market demand and consumption for good food. And goal 4, support sustainability and resilience in the food system. And then under each goal were objectives. We have 6 objectives: modernizing the food system, building a smart and connected food system, a dignity of service approach, elevating food as medicine, bolstering nutrition education, and championing a whole person, whole community approach. And when you see the plan, you'll see this all broken out. And then we went further. So under each objective, we had strategies. So I think what did I say? We had 6 objectives. So under each one, we had several strategies. So the total is we probably ended up with around 51 strategies. And this gives you an example. I'm not going to read every one of them, but it gives you an example when you get these slides of under modernizing the food system. Of course, there's a strategy about promoting local farmers and urban agriculture. There's a strategy about more efficient supply chain management, addressing mobility barriers for the end consumers, inclusive small and minority-owned food suppliers, minimizing food waste. Under objective 2, build a smart and connected food system, you'll see we talk about understanding the local food system, addressing data bias, investing in data and technology, which we thought was sorely lacking to connect all the food supply chain partners, streamlining access to and improving navigation of nutrition programs. Under objective 3, the dignity of service approach, this won't be a shock to any of you. We didn't see a lot of evidence about a human-centered approach, very robotic, very rigid approach. We thought we needed to formally adopt a human-centered approach to public benefits enrollment, creating this no wrong door system, streamlining public benefit enrollment, maximizing enrollment strategies, reducing stigma, which is a shame that we're still talking about that decades and decades later, but we still do, and addressing the under-enrolled populations. Elevating food as medicine was more promoting nutrition-dense foods as health and wellness strategy, and medically tailored meals as a meal option. We found there was a big gap there with some exceptions for people who really had some medical issues and needed these special meals. And then bolstering nutrition education, supporting nutrition security, a comprehensive nutrition education campaign, coordinating food security at all the county college campuses. And this one, our final objective, which is champion a whole person, whole community approach. really collaboration across all sectors that support safety net programs. We found so many, I hate to use the word silo because it's so overused, but so many silos in this on this issue, particularly even inside the county, my word. And so no coordination, and we really wanted to fortify that, strengthen workforce development, employment opportunities in this issue, expand quality after school care programs and daycare centers. So that's kind of a summary of each of the different strategies under the 6 objectives. And then under policy, so as I said earlier, policy and advocacy are critical for transforming systems, right? So we had a whole section in our plan that you'll read that calls for a policy change and system transformation. So policy changes that expand the impact of the food safety net, policy changes that make good food more readily available, policy changes to ensure that food providers offer affordable, healthy options, and then making the food supply more sustainable and reliable, improving consumer access to locally grown options. So you see there's a ton there. I think it was 51, or if not, a few more recommendations. Do we, people say we launched it, we were really happy with it, we were thrilled. And then everyone said to us almost immediately, now what? Okay, now what? It's time to implement this plan. And our vow from the very beginning was we never wanted this to be a great fancy looking plan that then sat on a shelf collecting cobwebs, or no shelf, but a digital shelf collecting cobwebs. So what's the implementation? So the county board of supervisors in February of this year, and I wish they had done it in December, but they did it in February, so I'm going to give them a lot of credit. They approved a motion unanimously that states that the board is going to utilize our strategic plan as a roadmap to equitable food access for LA County. So that was a big victory for us. And over 90 days, they directed key staff in the county to do the following 3 items: to identify some of the priorities from the plan, along with timelines, to identify county leads and implementation steps related to these priorities. And then the biggie is to develop a structure and a staffing plan for a never before Office of Food Equity, which we called for in our plan. And we've been pressuring the county to coordinate their food efforts like they do housing, like they do health, and put it in one place. So this Office of Food Equity for us is a huge win. So right now, we're in the middle of this 90 days. I think it's up in early May. So we're 3/4 of the way through. County staff is working right now on those 3 bullets. They've had convenings with all the county departments that have showed some very positive feedback from county departments, not just the usual suspects like DPSS and DPH and the new department for older adults, but some of the other departments like Parks and Rec and libraries have joined these convenings to share their thoughts about how they can participate in this food plan. So we were thrilled with the initial response from county departments. So there's been discussions with key board members and staff and others. And in early May, when the 90 days is up, recommendations will be made to the board to then figure out what they're going to do. What else is happening? Well, the roundtable continues meeting. We have a meeting tomorrow morning. We don't want to lose momentum. Our weekly steering committee meets to zero in on priorities and to help the county with its work. We're continuing to landscape what's out there and what each community's strength is, where the resources are. Our advocacy committee continues to meet. We had a meeting recently with legislative staff, which was co-hosted by our Food Roundtable Advocacy Committee and the County Legislative Office, to really raise awareness with legislators throughout the state and the federal government, raise awareness about what we're doing here in LA, raise awareness about why this needs their support. We're reviewing, we have a policy meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock. We're going to review another batch of bills related to food and see what we can support. And the role of the roundtable we see moving forward, even though this pilot project, the pilot officially ends June 30th, but we're going to continue the work. And we see the role of the roundtable moving forward: advocacy policy, securing more grants and resources for this issue, ensuring implementation of all those action items in the plan, and serving as a change agent. And so what we're seeing is this cross-sector approach on not only the roundtable, we're going to create new working groups to continue zooming in, laser focused on some of these strategies and issues we've identified. And we see it as a very cross-sector approach with the county core to the success. We need the county. Let's face it, it's a huge issue, just like we need the county for housing and other things. So they would be core to the success. They would provide policy advocacy support funding. The CBOs are obviously doing all the critical work, helping connect with the community and ensure implementation. We see philanthropy as spearheading implementation, being thought leaders, policy advocacy support and funding. The private sector we're looking to for partnerships, academia for research, and media to raise awareness. And the last point is critical because we don't think there is enough media awareness about this issue. We think there are lots of stories in the pandemic of long lines at food banks and pantries. We think that every time there's an emergency, there may be a story in the LA Times or nationally. But other than that, there's no constant barrage of newsworthy stories about why this is an important issue. And that's something that philanthropy is trying to tackle. So how do we keep this momentum going? Because this is the biggest concern we have, is that we did this plan, everybody cheered, it's there, the county's moving ahead with this office, but how do we keep pushing? So the beauty of the plan is that some of the action items in there, only the county can implement, but there's plenty in there that philanthropy working with the community can implement. So while the county's now finalizing the new Office of Food Equity, while they figure out the structure, where it's located in the county, how it's supported and funded, philanthropy has been meeting with community members to zero in on some low-hanging fruit and jumpstart some of the work we identified in our plan. So what we're trying to do right now is some of our immediate priorities, and I'm speaking on behalf of Annenberg, CCF, and Weingart, and we've been running around town speaking to our other funding partners because we were disappointed to find out that many of our funding, our peers in the philanthropic world also thought of this as an emergency issue. They doled out thousands and thousands of dollars during the pandemic and then pulled back when they thought the pandemic was over. And we're out there now speaking, all of us speaking to our peers about why this needs to be consistently funded, just like people are funding education and other issues. They can't come and go with food. So that's one thing we're doing. We're trying to lift the issue of hunger, food security, and raise more awareness even with our own peers. We want to bring to scale existing work that is proving successful. So we're looking around the community for things that we know are successful but need to be brought to scale, need a few more resources. We want to pilot an innovative idea that needs support. We want to invest in valuable data collection. We're talking to the LA Times about doing more about food. We're talking to the LA Times and other media outlets about funding a beat reporter, a food beat reporter, an editor that would provide a constant stream of information and reports about food, and video and digital news as well, because we really do think it's not just the public that doesn't know enough about this, it's the civic leaders and the funders and the donors that don't. So this last slide, Rick is here someplace. Rick and I met for coffee after I met him at Genevieve's group, and he threw out a gauntlet and said, is this all going to get done? And so I labeled this last slide, will it get done? And that's what I hear from the Ricks of the world is, okay, it sounds great, but will it get done? Well, it's not going to be done overnight, that's for sure, especially the systems changes. But I'm going to tell you that we are absolutely committed. Cindy Kennard, the head of the Annenberg Foundation, will continue to co-chair the roundtable. The county has, as you've heard, the county is committed to using this strategic plan as their roadmap. They are committed to creating this Office of Food Equity. To quote from the LA Times editorial at the end, they say the county has a sound plan to end hunger in the county by 2030. Let's put it into action. So we plan to do just that. I am here to tell you that we're not going to end our work, our funding, our commitment. We're all going to continue, and we hope you will join us. There's so many ways we can do it as we pull together more task forces, as we pull together more thought leaders, and as we try to tackle all of these strategies that we highlighted in our plan. So I think that's, yes, thank you very, very much. And I am happy to answer questions.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Lisa, for that very comprehensive report and update on what the Food Equity Roundtable has been doing. It's really impressive and really exciting. And I know we're excited to be a part of that process. So first of all, I just want to say thank you. And it is exciting to hear that, you know, that we're trying to get this message across to philanthropy. I was at the LA Business Journal Awards yesterday, and I was thinking, boy, there's so much philanthropy here. I really wanted to bring up that point that you mentioned about, you know, the crisis is not over. And I think everything that we can do to keep that message strong in the community is really important. I mean, I know at Westside Food Bank, last month, March, was our highest distribution month in our 40-year history. So, you know, we distributed over 500,000 pounds of food in 1 month. And, you know, a couple of years ago, that was like a quarter of our distribution. And now we're doing that in just 1 month. So we're seeing the need not only, you know, continuing since the COVID period, but actually expanding with inflation, with the loss of the CalFresh benefits, with the loss of the child tax credit benefits. You know, families and individuals are really struggling. And even at our most recent food security group meeting, some of our agencies were reporting significant upticks in the number of people seeking food and in the amount of food people need. So I'm very curious, I guess my all of that to lead up to saying, how is it going with getting that message out to philanthropy, and what can we all do to help? Because I know that at the food bank, we've experienced that. We saw a big influx of funding through the pandemic period, and the funders are still providing, you know, funding. It's much reduced. And it's a big concern. And it's, you know, we grew significantly and we need to maintain this higher level of service. And I think that's true for a lot of the agencies represented here today.
Well, and not only the other things you mentioned, inflation, everything, but with the moratorium on evictions ending, that's another puts people in a terrible bind, because now they owe all this back rent, and it's going to come out of something, and it may come out of food. So they're going to be lining up for food as well. So we are finding that it's slow going, you know, the thing about it is, I'm sure when you tell people that you've reached record distribution, they're probably shocked, because they'll probably look at you and say, Genevieve, oh, well, but the pandemic ended. Why is that? People just are not connecting the dots, and we don't think there's enough. And that's why we're talking to the LA Times and others, and KPCC and others. They're just not saying enough about what this is going to do for people, that food is going to be the one thing that drops by the wayside when everybody has to start paying their rent again and everything else they have to do. So it's slow going, but we've spoken to several philanthropic groups, and we're doing individual calls. We're doing one at a time, personal calls, personal meetings. We're hoping to do another briefing at Southern California Grant Makers.
I was just going to say a Southern California Grant Makers.
Yeah, we did one. We're all members. We did one way back to talk about the emergency and the creation of the roundtable, but we really desperately need to do another funding briefing. CCF's LARTA, the LARTA report that comes out about urban agriculture, that report is due out June 12th. So we're actually thinking about doing a funder briefing in June that will focus on that report on urban ag, and then tack on a lot of the other things that we're seeing and hearing from all of you, and why people need to focus on this issue and put it back into their funding portfolio. Will we convince everyone, Genevieve? Probably not, but we've already gotten some positive feedback from some of our peers who were waiting. And I will be honest, they were very skeptical. We've been talking to them for a couple of years, and they heard what we were doing. They were all kind of skeptical about the county. They were very skeptical that we'd get anything done. Now we're able to go back and say, hey, look at this plan. And by the way, the county's adopted it. And by the way, the county's creating an office. Nobody thought they would do that, but they're doing it. So people are a little bit less skeptical. But it's a hard road because there's so many darn issues out there, but this one's a human right and it's a safety net. I just don't understand why it's not up there with housing. I mean, you can put a roof over someone's head, but if they're starving to death, there's a lot of other things falling by. So
Well, know that you can count on me and this group to help tell that story, and I'm very happy to,
tell your
I'll stand
donors.
on the soapbox.
Yeah, no, tell your donors, it's really important. The LA Regional Food Bank is a juggernaut, so they do a good job of informing donors every week with bulletins and newsletters, but you've got to share with your donors these things you're seeing, because those donors will go out and talk to other donors. It's a very, very small network. Individual donors talk to their friends, they share your sound bites. They'll share shocking data, and it's important that that word gets spread. So you've got to keep informing your donors about what's going on. Oh, I see Chris Baca's hand up here.
Yeah, we've already seen a 40% increase in the number of people who are applying for food. And another thing that we're seeing is as people who are experiencing homelessness are get into motels, we've been feeding some of those people. So 26% of our clients now are formerly homeless people. So that's a whole cadre of people, a subpopulation that people don't realize need food, and they have no income basically. So it's an important thing for us that we're seeing out there. And I put something into the chat. I'd like to talk to you about. There's a conference next week, and I'd like to talk to you about maybe presenting at that.
Okay, and I just put my email in the chat room. I'm going to go old school and ask all of you, if you have stats like that to share, a 40% increase in Genevieve's share, feel free to email them to me, because what I will do is collect them and start sharing them with some of our funders. As we're talking to funders, the more ammunition I have, the better off we are. And I'd love to share not only what we're learning through the roundtable, but what I'm hearing from all of you. There's nothing like quoting a leader in this issue and saying, look, they're seeing a 40% increase. So just email me any information you have to share about your work, and I'm happy to communicate it to others and to funders and so on.
Yeah, and I also just want to add, and we talked about this at our food security group meeting, the more that we can collaborate to tell the story, at Westside Food Bank, we have a little bit more resources and bandwidth now than we've ever had to do that storytelling. I hired a really fantastic communications person who used to be a TV news producer. I don't know if some of you have had the pleasure of meeting Caitlin Little yet, but she is fantastic, and she's been producing video content for us. And we're actually working on a few stories right now that we're in conversations with KNBC, as well as some other news outlets. We just got featured on CBS News about the loss of the pandemic benefits. And so we've been collecting stories and working with a few clients. We're actually just pre-filming some interviews and using that as part of our pitch. So if anyone wants to collaborate on that with us, we have the resources to kind of do the filming and do the pitching to the news networks. But we definitely need support in identifying clients that can tell that personal story, because that's the thing that really gets certainly the media more interested. And I think it also touches the heartstrings of those in philanthropy to have a face. Statistics are one thing, but when you hear about someone's personal story, that really makes a big difference. And I know when I share my personal story of, I used to be that mom with 3 kids that was, surviving because I was getting, SNAP benefits and housing subsidies and, health insurance assistance, and really getting a job at the food bank almost 20 years ago. And thank you, Bruce Rankin, my former boss, for hiring me. That was the thing that got me out of poverty and into self-sufficiency. And that's a powerful story. And I think there's so many people like me right now who are losing their benefits and struggling to figure out how they're going to feed their families.
Genevieve, did Matthew King ever reach out to you about putting some of these video stories on the Food Roundtable website?
I don't think so, but let's
Okay,
make that.
I'll make sure it happens because we do have a website. I'm not going to tell you millions of people look at it, but we're trying to grow. We're trying to grow the audience. And one of the things we'd love to do is share some of your stories. And Matthew is a PR consultant that the county uses that we've been able to access. And he can pull videos together and then post them on our site.
Great. We'll connect with him and make sure we get some of our content out there.
Any other questions or comments even, or information to share? Oh, there's Rick.
Would I be wrong in saying that part of why the county is listening a little more is because of Annenberg, California Community Foundation? In other words, aren't their voices the loudest out there when those people
We've
step
been
up?
loud. We've been very loud, Rick. Yes.
Now, in one respect, I think instead of people like us going to the county, we should go to Annenberg and California Community Foundation and say, we're behind you. Because they're the ones that really can always get the county's ear.
Well, they would love, look, Cindy would love, if she heard you say that, she'd be going to her board of trustees immediately and reading your quote, because then her board will ensure that they continue supporting this issue. She's constantly giving them updates. We have been very loud. I know that the county, I hope there are no county people on this Zoom, but there are. The county will say that they would have done this anyway. I'm sure they'll say all of that. But I honestly believe that had it not been for philanthropy, by the way, we had very good county partners with the Chief Sustainability Office of the county, phenomenal partners in Gary Giroux, who left, and he's now with the city with Katie Yaroslavsky, but now Rita Kampalat, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer right now. They've been wonderful partners for us, but philanthropy has been very, very loud. We paid for this pilot, so we were able to sort of say, okay, we're paying, so we've got to be involved. We've got to co-chair. And we've been loud. And even after they said they would create this Office of Food Equity, we cheered. But Cindy and I and a member of the California Community Foundation drove downtown and met with Lindsay Horvath and met with Janice Hahn's staff and said, okay, great news that you're creating this office. Now, how are you going to pay for it? And by the way, philanthropy doesn't believe it should be buried in some county department. We want it up in the CEO. We want it with the chief executive or with the board office. So we're sending messages very clearly. I mean, we can't control what the county does, but we are being loud. You're right. And that's what it takes is people, but all of you have to be loud too, because you're in the trenches. We can be loud, but we're not doing the work. That's why I love, please email me your data, because I can then be loud using your data, which is even more powerful.
Chris, did you have your hand up?
I did. I was going to say, we are seeing some more cooperations between the city and the county, city of LA and the county. Their food programs are working together much more closely, especially since Laura Trejo moved over from city to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's helping some, I think. Now, I'm not sure, are the county supervisors meeting in public yet again?
I
Back
think,
is on.
yeah, I think the last meeting was in public last
Yeah,
week. Yeah, I think so.
Pre-pandemic, we got about 30 Meals on Wheels organizations to attend a county supervisors meeting, and actually got the county supervisors to recognize the food insecurity issue back then. And maybe that's something you want to think about, is organizing, a couple hundred people to show up, or a couple hundred or 100 organizations to show up at a county supervisors meeting. We had about 30 last time, and again, that was pre-pandemic. And Sheila was a big supporter, and I'm sure there will be other supporters now that Sheila's gone.
Supervisor Horvath is all in. We met with her personally, and we kind of bombarded her. She had just started, and we said, Sheila Kuehl had been supportive. She had co-sponsored all these food motions with Janice Hahn. We hope you'll continue. We didn't know what answer we get, but she's all in. And she now, not only is she all in, she has a new deputy director, Susan Kim, who part of her portfolio is food. And she reached out to me. I met with her last week. So it's not just saying I'm all in. She's got a food person. She's got a person who's got food as part of their portfolio. And Susan is a wonderful person. I was very impressed with her, and she had a copy of our report in front of her and was anxious to know how to move forward. But I think that's a great idea, for Chris, because there's a lot of power in having people in that room. I think Daniel asked me to say something about faith community representation partnership. I mean, we didn't do a lot on this, Daniel. Clearly, faith-based organizations, churches, synagogues all did a lot during the pandemic related to food. They continue to do a lot. They've always had pantries, and my church has a pantry. We probably need to do more. I'm glad you raised this. We probably need to do more with that community. So I'm very glad. Thank you for raising it.
Yeah, and I think, we have a faith committee here at the coalition. So I think it might be helpful to maybe have you connect with that committee, because I know that our faith-based members are doing a tremendous amount of work in terms of outreach, in terms of direct service. And there's a wonderful level of support that we can call on from the faith community.
Thank you. Other information that I can take back with me, or any other questions, comments?
I'll email you separately.
Okay, that's fine. And please feel free to do so. My email's there. I check it constantly. So sometimes there's a lag time, as Rick knows, but not often. And I
Well,
see
Lisa, I
there's
can't
Zach.
thank you enough. Oh, we've got a hand with Zach, yes.
Yes, I'm glad he's going to say something. Hi, Zach.
Hi, everyone. Zachary Geidzik, formerly with LA County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, and now with LA County Supervisor Lindsay Horvath. So I was actually about to jump in and say, okay, well, let's get you in a meeting with the supervisor and with Susan Kim. So I'm very glad that we've already jumped on it. And I was texting with Darcy that Lindsay's making it very easy to represent her in the community. She's moving faster than I am. But just want to thank you so much for this meeting, for all the information you shared and all the work that you're doing. This is really exciting. And of course, everyone come down to HOA. I love seeing events like that happen. So thank you.
It's so funny. Listen, we can't do it. To Rick's point, it's not just we couldn't have done any of this without champions on the board. So thanks to Janice Hahn, Sheila Kuehl, and now Janice Hahn and Lindsay Horvath, we would have gotten nowhere without board champions. I wish all 5 would be all in on food, and maybe we'll get to that point. But so far, 2 out of 5 is not bad, and they're powerful voices.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. Any more questions before we close? We're getting really close to the 10 o'clock hour, and putting on time is always a victory. So that's amazing. You guys are so busy. Appreciate your time and, coming out to hear this. And I just want to thank Lisa. This has been such incredibly important information and very interesting. There's a lot of factors at play. And so I really appreciate everything that you're doing and for taking the time to give this presentation.
Oh, thank you. I'm really honored to be part of this group. So thank you. And really can't say enough about what you're all doing from day to day.
All right. Well, you guys, it's wonderful to see you all. And I'm going to stop our recording.